Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Quantum Ladder Podcast. This is part 3 of our mini-series on what's in our food, what's in our water, and today, what is in our air. It's unfortunate to say, but those are the 3 most polluted things around us. We encounter it every day, and unless you take proactive steps, you may not even realize what is actually happening. We think we're doing okay. We think it's not as bad as some other places, which it isn't, but bad is still bad. We're going to go over some details, also give you some tips and pointers on things you can do to increase your personal air quality. And with fires and air quality being poor all around the world, now more than ever is an important time to really pay attention to this topic. So it's going to be a great topic today. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you, everybody in the chat room. We see you down there as well. So grab that cup of coffee and let's get into it. Welcome back to Quantum Ladder Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good friend and co-host, Mr. Marquise Williams.
What's up, everybody? Let's get this party started. Part three. I'm ready.
Part 3. We didn't ever plan to do a what's in our food. And that led into, well, we can't talk food unless we talk water. And that led into, well, hey, what about our air? So this is kind of grown out of nothing. But we got amazing feedback on what's in our food and what's in our water. Quite scary, actually, if you think about it. And we've both made some personal changes in our lives as well after doing this research. Now that you know, you can't just go on with your daily life and be like, oh, I'm sure everything's fine. It's hard, especially when you have a family. And when you educate yourself, you're kind of you're charged up and you feel like you need to do something. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. This is going to be an important chat. Everybody out there in the world of YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and the UNX Network, we've got a bunch of videos and images to present today. So if you're listening on the radio or Apple, and you want to see the videos, just head on over to Quantum Ladder Podcast and on our YouTube channel. And if anybody wants to watch us live rather than the replay, it's every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern time on our channel. And we're also very proud to report that today's show is sponsored by H2 Water Expert, our good friends there. They are the experts in water filtration technology. And remember, if you don't properly filter your water, your body becomes the filter. And full disclosure, we don't receive any money for this promotion. We were sent a couple of machines to test and use in our personal lives. And this is the only machine that we found that actually stands up to what their claims are. Some water companies are claiming that it will cure cancer and regrow a limb and all this crazy stuff, when really you just need properly filtered water that's hydrogen enriched. And it makes a world of difference. I know even just within a week or two of using it, I definitely feel better. I have more energy. We don't have any film anymore in places that we used to. Just overall better. If you're on our Facebook and you see some of the tests we've done, you'll understand where that's coming from. So we recommend it. Definitely give it some attention. Doesn't have to cost a fortune. And if anybody wants to learn more, just visit h2waterexpert.com and tell them Quantum Ladder Podcast sent you. So with that, let's get into today's topic. What is in our air? Marquise, I put together a little video narration because you taught me how to do these so well. So
I teach you one time.
A little louder than the voice at the end, but I'm nitpicking. But let's get started. Let's embark on an exploration of the very air we breathe, a complex blend of gases and particles shaping the character of our daily existence. Within this atmospheric mosaic, we find nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulate matter. Products of industry and the relentless organic compounds, or VOCs, join the mix, creating an urban tapestry of pollutants. The immediate impacts are tangible. irritated lungs, aggravated allergies, and difficulty breathing. Our immediate environment prompts us to use the protective measures, from masks and filters to advanced medications. As we peer into the broader environmental narrative, deforestation emerges as a contributor to carbon emissions. Industrial discharges alter water quality, creating a domino effect that transcends geographical borders. Amidst this intricate reality, we wield agency. Filtration emerges as a pivotal player in reshaping the air we breathe. The installation of air filters becomes a pragmatic step. These filters, adept at capturing particulate matter, allergens, and pollutants, provide a tangible buffer against the invisible adversaries that permeate our surroundings. Whether in our homes or within the broader industrial landscape, the utilization of efficient air filtration systems is a proactive measure. It's a deliberate step towards breathing cleaner air and mitigating the immediate and long-term impact of air pollution. This is the reality we navigate. Understanding the composition of our air and taking action is crucial. From reducing personal emissions to implementing robust filtration systems, we are empowered to steer towards a cleaner and healthier future.
Great freaking. I want to be clear. I taught him one time. He is self-taught. All I did was say, hey, this is how you do it. He's like, okay, I got it. Everything he just caught on to within moments. And then he just kind of ran with it. So here we go.
Well, it would be really expensive. We'd be spending a couple grand a month to have professionals create that stuff for us. But thank God we learned how to do it. And it's a good summary as to what the things we're going to cover in today's show. Cool little visual. Sometimes dry conversation is just that, dry convo. And you never get that on this show. We're always chock full of images. So essentially what we're talking about is pollution, various sources of pollution. Everything from airplanes, cars, trucks, buses, factories, industrial plants, mining, livestock, cities, fertilizers, even natural elements such as like volcanoes and wildfires, lightning and that type of thing can really contribute to poor air quality. And we've all heard the air quality index, especially if you live in an area affected by forest fires. They're going to give you a number as to what your air is like. So essentially good is 0 to 50. Anything 51 to 100 is acceptable, but it's moderate, right? So again, EPA is going to be a little bit dumbed down to say, well, no, it's okay. It's acceptable. It's all good. Nobody panic. Yeah, but really it should always be 0. In a perfect world, when this planet was around before we were, it was a 0. And of course, there's always greenhouse gases and things like that, but we're talking specifically about air pollution. We'll get into that a little bit more. But in the past couple of years, there have been cities that are red or even purple. You know, imagine having a rating of 300. It's like you have an increased risk of immediate health effect. And so does everybody, you know, and people think staying inside is really going to be, well, I won't go out today. The air is bad. We're going to show you that the air in your house is many times worse than the air outside. And, you know, what did you think of this topic, Marquise? I know we've been real busy with doing lots of research for our past 2 episodes. This one, very similar in terms of the toxicity, just different players involved. So what did you think of it all?
Yeah, this one took a little bit of a learning curve because although I was aware, we all vaguely know that there's air quality issues. That index, I see that all the time when I check the air, of course, every day because of my allergy issues. Sometimes my voice is different because of my allergies, which are bad. I spend a lot of time inside, given that I have a at-home business and I work pretty much at home, so I don't really go out much. And I can assure you that when I go outside, even though the air smells funny, there's that weird smell from outside, it's still not as bad as sometimes the inside air is.
Yeah.
But that index really helps me kind of see how bad the air can be. I think a couple times where I live, a couple times a month, the air quality gets into like the orange area. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad here. There's a lot of factories and stuff like that in a small town. We're surrounded by mountains, so everything kind of like just like funnels up through. So it can be really dangerous. I also live in my home. Even for myself, I wear a mask just because a lot of times it's not about COVID. I have issues breathing, so the mask helps me breathe a little bit better. I have one that if it gets really bad, I have a mask that has a filter in it, a HEPA filter in it that blows clean air into the mask itself. It sometimes gets that bad, and it's actually gotten worse year over year the last 5 or so years. So I had to learn a lot and make even more changes to my lifestyle, to my family. We have HEPA filters in every single room. So it's not like we haven't taken precautions before, but after reading about this topic, I'm even more concerned, especially about the inside air. and I'm thinking about making even more changes for circulation in the home. So it's been a big topic. This is another
Yeah.
big topic that's intense and affects me directly, and everybody. We have to breathe to live.
Yeah.
So
And we're going to get into filtration. What is a good filtration system? What is not? What are some of the myths? What are some things you should look for? Even some natural things you can do, like plants and things like that as well. But I got a little clip here. It's just it is, you mentioned mountains around you. So, and especially being in California and areas like that, where you live in valleys for the most part, people tend to live flat. Valleys are actually, they keep the pollution there. So the air doesn't really move, and you can have this sort of cloud over cities like Los Angeles and things like that, that even though there's wind, it's not really getting rid of the pollution. So here's a little clip on the air quality in valleys being much worse than surrounding areas.
LA, Phoenix, these valleys that people talk about. When you are in a valley surrounded by mountains and other things such as that, the air gets trapped. The particulate gets trapped, and then you're breathing that in. For a day, for a weekend, for a month, for a year, maybe, not that bad, right? But when it's years, it begins to compound, and that can lead to serious issues. Why? It begins to fill up your rain barrel, right? If it was the only thing, probably not a big deal. But then you have to look at the heavy metals you're exposed to in your foods, in your water, the pesticides, right? That's what the rain barrel effect is all about. Want to learn more about the rain barrel effect, just go to stephencabral.com. But these are important things to think about. These are not things you joke around about, oh, toxins, etc. Yeah, we can joke around about them, but here's the thing. That's when we get into our 50s and 60s that they cause issues.
Yeah, they're the silent killers.
Yeah, just like the food and water expert, we were looking for the smoking gun of like, okay, if you just cut this out, you'll be good, but there's no such thing. And these are not necessarily things that you're even going to get sick overnight, couple of years. You could say, I've been drinking tap water for 30 years. But if you die 10 years early, will you know that that's the reason why? Right? You don't know that this is a long-term toxicity, and it's a little bit here, a little bit there. It's your food, it's your water, it's your detergent, it's your clothing, it's your makeup, it's things in your house, it's the pollution outside, it's everything you touch. So if you can just take progressive steps to eliminate even some of that, you're ahead of the curve. And for people that are particularly sensitive to these types of things, they know the effect, right? Like yourself, if you go out there unprotected, or if you don't take measures in your home, you can't breathe. Yeah. Anybody with asthma or respiratory issues knows all too well what that feeling is like. That's a horrible feeling, like you're choking in air.
Yeah. And, or that you can't get a deep breath. Well. You're out of breath. You can't get a deep breath. You feel like there's that tension in your chest. Every breath is forced. I mean, I feel like that right now, just because it's been a pretty bad allergy day. But yeah, there's a lot of issues with when you have breathing problems and you're exposed to indoor and outdoor pollution, allergens, mold. Even there could be mold from things you don't even see. Mold is very difficult to find unless you rip out the tiles of your floor or the ceiling. You don't know what's there, and it just happens naturally just because of you're even if you shower. So there's that buildup sometimes around the shower, or if if you have a leak, if anybody spills water on the floor. If you live in an apartment, for example, and people lived in the apartment before you, of course, they could have caused damage that you don't know about because the landlord just fixes it up. And mold can be extremely toxic to you and in your brain and your body. It can cause all kinds of health ailments and illnesses. It can cause cognitive effects. That's just mold, and that's not including all the stuff we're going to talk about today. So, yeah, the key is to take daily precautions, but we're going to talk about all that, all of what to look out for, and then we'll talk about the solutions towards the end, because there's quite a few things we can do.
Yeah, you mentioned mold, and I remember when I grew up in Toronto, there was a neighbor a few doors down, and they had a young daughter, and she developed cancer at like 12 or 13 years old. She was able to overcome that and live a healthy life, but in subsequent years, they found that they had a roof leak that nobody knew about, and the house was full of mold. Now, I'm not saying one directly caused the other, but they had a house that had mold in it. Nobody knew for years. They didn't check. And their daughter wound up developing cancer at a young age. Maybe it's totally unrelated, maybe not. But that always stuck in my mind of the dangers of mold, and seeing my neighbor have their kid, a 12-year-old kid with bald head from chemotherapy is not something that anybody wants to, invoke on their families. And again, we just don't know. And like you said, somebody spills water, or there's a roof leak, they paint over the stain and everything's good. And you're like, oh, this house is great, but you really don't know. And there are some meters and testing things that you can use. We'll get into that a bit later too. but essentially the effects of air pollution. So as of 2020, air pollution around the world causes 4.5 million deaths and another 2.2 million deaths caused by indoor air pollution. As we mentioned, the air inside your house many times is worse than the air outside. Because you have, spores, mold, pollen, dust, but you could also have VOCs or volatile organic compounds,
Mhm.
off gassing from, your carpet, plastics in your house, even your car. That new car smell is toxic. It is the exhaust from vinyls and plastics and all the synthetic products they put in the car, the rubbers and all that stuff. That's not good to breathe.
No,
We all refer to it as like, new car
of
smell. Well, new
course.
car smell is toxic. And the scary thing is most of these airborne pollutants you cannot detect. You can't smell them, taste them. You may have some effects, like, if you're allergic to cats, you go to a house where there's cats, your eyes start to itch and water. But it's not
Mhm.
always that cut and dry when it comes to air pollution. We can think we're doing just fine. Or I have an air filter in every room. What kind of air filter? Is it the right filter for the rating of the room, the
Right.
size? What
Yep.
kind of filter does it have? Is it a real HEPA, medical grade HEPA? Is it a proprietary HEPA that's not really a HEPA? Is it using charcoal? Is it using ionization? Is it using water? There's a lot of different things that get into that. So similar to water, people, have been very, and we've got a lot of feedback from people saying, oh, I use a Brita water filtration pitcher for all my water.
Yeah.
Check out our tests on that. It does nothing. Literally does next to nothing. Maybe
Oh,
it pulls
listen.
a little bit of chlorine out. Other than that, everything remains. The pesticides, the pharmaceuticals, the heavy metals, all that stuff is in there. It's a shame that we even need to protect ourselves from this stuff. But the things that worked in the 90s don't work now because the toxicity levels are up. There's new compounds that are smaller that these filters don't catch. And there's new things we're putting in the air and the water and everything else that didn't, quite frankly, exist 20 years ago. So none of the filters were built to deal with that. And now the problems have compounded exponentially. So they predict that by 2030, if we can reduce EPA, we will prevent 40,000. This is just in the US. We'll prevent 40,000 premature deaths, 34,000 avoided hospitalizations, and 4.8 million work days lost. People can't work when they can't breathe and they feel like crap. So it's a drain not only on our bodies and our health, but also the economy and small business and big business and everything else. And some of the major players that we think of or have heard of when we talk about air pollution, we mentioned volatile organic compounds. These are basically pollutants that react with nitrogen oxides. When they mix with sunlight or UV, they form what's called ground level ozone. Now, that's very different from atmospheric ozone, which we have the ozone layer. But ground level ozone is a big deal. It's what creates the smog. And VOCs are emitted from cars, trucks, buses, pollutants, benzene, acid. What is that? Acetaldehyde? Acetaldehyde, something like that. Butadiene, all these huge names that nobody knows. Regardless, they are linked to cancer. Nitrogen oxides, that again is produced from ground level ozone. They can cause things like lung irritation, weaken your defense against respiratory infection, pneumonia, influenza. So if you're getting sick every 6 months, check your air quality. It could be
Yeah.
your overall ability to fight back. Carbon monoxide is very important. Make sure your house has a carbon monoxide detector because if you have a furnace or a water heater, it is burning natural gas. It is producing CO, whether you know it or not. And CO is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas that can kill you and your entire family. So get a CO detector. It's very important. Do you have one of those in your house, Marquise? Carbon monoxide detector?
I think there's the smoke detector. I don't know if it's the same thing, but there's a couple of them, and one of them is at least one of them is a CO
Yeah.
detector.
Now,
I'm
the
not sure
difference
which
between a
one.
carbon monoxide detector and a smoke detector you want to put up high because that's smoke rises, but
Yeah.
CO actually begins at the ground level. So you
So
want to
then
have
it's
this
yeah.
close to the
So
ground because if
that's
you put it
okay.
way up high, by the time it
Yep.
reaches that detector, your
It's too
house is
late. You're
full of it.
dead. Yeah.
And
So
you
there is
basically go to
that's
sleep. You don't know if this were to spring a leak in the middle of the night, you basically wouldn't wake up. So I have one on the ground level where my furnace room is. I also have one on the upstairs where we all sleep. But again, it's in a plug close to the ground. So at least
Mm.
that will trigger before the upper air is completely contaminated. So that's very important. Sulfur dioxide is another one. Power plants and vehicles, anything producing or burning sulfur containing fuels like diesel or coal or anything like that, that interacts with UV in the atmosphere and causes that ozone. And then greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and things like that, not very good. Now, percentages here. The US is basically saying that all nitrous oxides only represent about 45% of the air pollution. They're saying VOCs are less than 10%, and the parts per million are basically less than 10% as well. So basically saying that it's, not as bad as we think. But on the other hand, the EPA is also like, just so you know, there's lead in the air, so be careful.
Yeah.
And essentially, it's in the air through ore and metals, processing, piston engine aircraft. They produce exhaust, right? Planes are burning fuel in the air. Other areas would be like waste incinerators, utilities, lead acid battery manufacturing, things like that. So it's a big deal. Lead in the air. Basically, this is how it works. It is produced through, emissions from factories and things like that, urban city centers. It goes up, becomes part of that rain cycle. The precipitation then comes down on everything, so leading to lead sediment in the water. That affects birds and the animals that they eat as well, right? If a raptor is eating field mice and the field mice are drinking lead-rich water, it's just like the microplastics in the oceans.
Right.
Bigger fish eat smaller fish, and by the time you get to really big fish, there's been millions of little fish eaten by other fish. The toxicity is so high for all this heavy metals, microplastics, carcinogens in the stuff we are eating. And because they're in the natural environment too, they can't really escape it, so be careful. Here's basically what happens. You get exhaust from a car, nitrous oxide. It goes through this UV cycle, and essentially ground level ozone is formed. That's a big problem. This is what it looks like here. So 90% of the ozone is in our stratosphere. That's what they refer to as the good ozone. In our lower atmosphere is where it becomes a problem. We have ground level ozone. It's a major compound. That's what you see smog, and you see that haze and those sort of filters, don't catch all that stuff, whether you're inside or outside. It can linger for days. And there's definite health implications of that. People getting sick, cognitive impairments. You're not able to focus as well as you should. If CO2 levels are too high, it basically affects everything. And it could even be deadly. And here is a clip explaining just that.
Please listen to this story and share it with other people, because this is a prime tragic example of how the air quality alerts that have been affecting over 100 million people throughout the United States due to wildfire smoke this summer can have devastating health consequences. This is Destiny Mercado. She was 26 years old, living in Chicago, and had a history of asthma since she was 5 years old. When the Canadian wildfire smoke caused that white haze throughout the Midwest last month, she started to have increased asthma symptoms, even though she was taking a lot of precautions to reduce her chances of getting sick. And she got sick enough that she went into the hospital. They had a quick turnaround time. She was feeling better and then was discharged home, only to have a worsening of her symptoms to the point that when she got back into the hospital, it was too late and she unfortunately passed away. Exposure to poor air quality can have all sorts of negative impacts on your health, whether you're healthy or not, because the air pollution can deposit on your skin, your eyes, your nose, and sinuses, and when it gets into your lungs, it's small enough that it can get into your bloodstream and cause inflammation throughout your body that's not necessarily apparent right away. It can take several days before that inflammation builds up enough to create symptoms, which unfortunately was the case for Destiny Mercado. Everybody is at risk of potentially getting sick when the air quality is poor, but there are sensitive groups that are at higher risk, including those who are young, old, pregnant, and people who have cardiovascular and or respiratory diseases. So we should all be making sure that we take this seriously when these alerts happen, and I wish you well.
Yeah. So there was a couple things that I wanted to talk about with that specifically, because with this PM, they call it the particulate matter. And he was mentioning how this stuff can get on your skin. It can get onto your clothes, your hair, your face, whatever. It can penetrate your lungs and then subsequently into the bloodstream.
Yeah.
And that's what causes a lot of the cardiovascular, the cerebrovascular and respiratory problems that people have. They have guidelines for this, of course. But when we have things like increase in pollution or these carbon emissions into the atmosphere, which essentially cause all kinds of problems, including increase in forest fires, the intensity of these forest fires, which of course causes that smoke. He mentioned the white smoke that happened that was affecting all these mass areas. I think whenever Canada got hit, we got hit here in Pennsylvania. I'm in central Pennsylvania. How the heck? Like it came all the way down. Now this isn't the first time it's happened, but it was one of the worst times it ever happened. And there were warnings to not go outside. I mean, they literally were warning us, don't go outside. This happened in Canada. Why? Like, we can't go outside. What are you guys dealing with? That was crazy to me. And it's crazy about how many deaths and I mean, what is it? 4.2 million people die per year.
And 2.2 million just from indoor air. People that work in office buildings that aren't exposed to outdoor air pollution.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
people that work from home or just in an enclosed area that doesn't have proper filtration. You build up these toxins. 2.2 million people a year die from the air in their homes or surrounding environment.
And we're not even, and again, there's so many different types of toxins. There's, as we were talking here, there's the particulate matter, which affects us all not equally, but people who are at risk, who have these cardiovascular issues or allergies or asthma, it affects us a lot more than everybody else, but still affects people. There's the nitrogen dioxide, which you get from obviously from cars and traffic and things like that. The sulfur dioxide that you mentioned, you get from burning fossil fuels from like these power plants and stuff like that. The carbon monoxide, which is another thing that's caused by combustion of carbon fuels. There's a carbon that's in fuel. It's in some of these fuels, and these things lead to all kinds of, and not just in home, but also outside. Because I know you mentioned about carbon monoxide in the home, which deprives you of oxygen. It's in the air as well. I mean, the increase in all these different organic compounds, as they say, they can kill you. They can, or at the very least, affect your quality of health and cognition. We always wonder what's wrong with the world. Maybe it's just the food we eat, the air we breathe, and the water we drink. All those things are affecting people's cognition, their ability to think critically, to feel, if you will, normal, and to make better decisions about how they should view these problems so we can fix them. When you have an entire nation of people, like in the U.S. here, who thinks, who kind of thinks the everything that is about carbon emissions and global warming and climate change, they oppose it to the point of religiosity, not because of anything other than political reasons. And that's a shame, because those people, they're affected too. It's another one of those things where the man is sitting on the tree branch and he just doesn't, he'll cut the tree branch he's sitting on to hurt someone that's on the tree branch he wants to get off. It's interesting.
And it's not just necessarily, long-term acute effects. Think about people that are developing, young people, children, schools. I mean, during COVID, they implemented certain filters to improve the air quality. But overall, that's not filtering out some of the things pollutant-wise. And nobody's really checking the air quality in school for these types of things. And here's a video I've got on how poor air will impair learning and child development.
If you wanted an illustration of just how little our society cares about our children, look no further than Toronto Public School. Following years of a pandemic, they still haven't done anything about indoor ventilation. And it's so bad that the air quality is not only unhealthy, it is actively impeding learning, as the CO2 levels tested, in many cases, are high enough to be affecting cognitive ability. So cognitive ability starts to be impacted by CO2 levels around 1,000 parts per million, and around 2,500, the effects become quite significant. In Toronto, there have only been 106 schools tested in the last 5 years. It's only 15% of schools. But out of those, 43% had a reading above 1,000 parts per million. That means that 43% of the schools had an air quality that was negatively impacting learning. There were a number of classrooms that measured above 2,000 and one classroom that had a CO2 level of 2,650 parts per million. That's high enough to have a significant negative cognitive effect. How are you supposed to learn where you can't breathe? So to give a sense, fresh air is somewhere around 300 to 400 parts per million. But this is a significant concern. That being said, the school board completely denies that there's even a problem. Quote, "To be clear, there is no school or site in the entire Toronto District School Board that has unhealthy or unsafe air. Quote, we rely upon our staff and students to let us know if they have issues with stagnant air or something off in a classroom. It doesn't necessarily reflect constant levels, but one point in time which was measured and used to correct the problem. Important to note, 51 of those 106 schools they tested never had a follow-up. But they are literally just claiming that this doesn't happen, that these widespread high CO2 levels simply don't exist, despite all evidence to the contrary. Like, have we as a society just given up on keeping our kids safe? Like, when did we decide that the places where our students spend their entire days should be run on a shoestring budget? How is anyone okay with this?
So
The thing that drives me nuts is when they say we rely on our staff and students to tell us if there's an issue. You don't have a sensor in
rely
your
on you.
body to detect parts per million for CO2 or other contaminants. How the hell are you supposed to tell them? I mean, think about it. It is the exact opposite of oxygen. You need an oxygen-rich environment to enhance cognitive thinking.
Yeah.
They should be pumping straight oxygen into schools, but instead we're essentially starving their brains, giving them half of what they need. And then we wonder why they're having a hard time focusing and paying attention in class. It could be the friggin' air quality. I mean, this leads to systematic issues. What if you had a kid that maybe needs a little bit of help in school? He can't function now because the air is crap. He becomes hyperactive. Then his parents are like, oh, I guess we got to get you some medication because you have ADHD. And it could be caused by something as simple as the air quality in that kid's school, not even giving him a fair chance. And the immediate reaction is big pharma. Yeah, we got a pill for that. Don't worry. Again, more money. You can let the corporations produce this pollution. And then there's other corporations with a remedy to fix the damage that did. Like, how convenient. It all revolves around the dollar. And the one suffering is us, our children, and our quality of life. So, but if we don't take the time to learn a little bit about this stuff and what they're actually doing and getting away with, we're none the wiser. We're just like sheep. We're going to go about our day. We feel okay. You know, what if you're only getting half of what you need in terms of clean air for 30 years because you never checked? I mean, a lot of people maybe have water testers or other things like that, but who has an air tester in their home? Unless you're real diligent. I don't. And I consider myself more diligent than most. I have no idea what the parts per million are in my house. That'll change after today's episode because I'm going to go buy one.
We're making changes.
You know, like it's almost like an annoyance. Like, why do I have to do all of this stuff? It seems like more work that we shouldn't have to do. And the way I see it, you got two options. You either find out or you don't. Either way is not going to change the fact that these things are present. You know, and, they mentioned the fires in Canada were very bad this year. We get bad fires every year, similar to California. The difference is this year, the air blew south, whereas normally you guys don't see it. We are stuck dealing with it in the Canadian north. And, the winters have less and less precipitation. We have quicker, milder springs. So instead of a slow melt of that mountain snow, it winds up being a torrential flood. And then there's no rain for, earlier in the summer season than before. Fire season starts earlier than before. It creates more pollution in itself. That, you know what I mean? And then you have greenhouse gases associated with that. This is a big chain reaction. And, global warming doesn't always come in the effect of warmer areas. Look in the US this year, you guys had crazy snow blizzards in places that you shouldn't. The jet stream collapsed and the Arctic air flowed south. That's why you get snow in Texas or however far south it went. So people are going, well, the world isn't warming. Why? It's colder here than ever before. That is a scary thing. That should not happen.
It's abnormal. Yeah.
It's not normal. And the reason for that is the jet stream, which would normally allow a little bit of cold, but basically keep it at bay. If the currents change, effectively, you have cold in places that you shouldn't. I mean, it was 15 degrees centigrade here the other day. It should be about 0 or minus 10 at this time of year, right? It's February in Canada. Yeah, it's more temperate on the West Coast, but it should still be cold. We're still closer to the Arctic than everybody else. Shouldn't be this warm in the winter. And this, some years is very, very little precipitation. It's a big cycle, right? Have you noticed any weather pattern changes where you live in Pennsylvania?
I mean, I don't think I'm old enough to really tell that there's any serious weather patterns within my lifetime, but people older than me, the previous generation says, things are very different. There was flooding in at the wrong time this year. That was really concerning for people. They said when they were younger, we're talking like people in their 60s were like, that never happened. The problem is that they're denying some of the same people in that same demographic are unfortunately being essentially influenced by media figures who say there's nothing wrong here, everything's fine, don't worry about it, and they trust those media sources. So even though they see the changes, they see the weather changes, because as you mentioned that there's snow at all, they believe there's no issue, because there was this increase in colder weather for these storms, these blizzards, these snowstorms this year. They see, look, there clearly isn't any climate change or any global warming, because if it was global warming, it'd be hotter. I don't. The problem is that they're trusting people that are telling them that there's nothing to see here. But if they zoom out, if you just zoom out, meaning look at the amalgamation of data, the data is pretty clear. We are experiencing these climate changes, these changes in weather patterns because of global warming, because of these emissions, because of all these particulate matter, these increases in particulate matter, because of all the. I mean, if you look at me and my my lady were watching 3 Mile Island documentary last night. It was touching, and the way that those corporate, just real quick, the way that nuclear power plant handled that situation was beyond criminal, and somehow no one got in trouble for it. However, there were people that were whistleblower. The whistleblower that was coming out had to face quite a bit of a backlash and denial. Even and of course they as they were releasing press conferences and saying that, oh, everything was fine. We're going to continue to we're going to continue to do work here. Things were getting worse and worse and worse underneath, and they knew this, and yet they kept pushing forward. That is insane. If it would have kept going, they said that it would have made the entire East Coast uninhabitable forever. I mean, if they would have had some kind of a nuclear meltdown. Now we know about Chernobyl. We know what can happen.
Yeah.
Why are we not paying attention to some of the most viable alternatives to some of these problems, for some of our energy crisis problems that we have? Maybe it's the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat. I don't. Maybe it's affecting our decision making as a society.
Yep. Yeah, and when people aren't thinking straight, when they're not in the right, physical health, when they're weak and immunocompromised, it's then much easier for them to accept things like propaganda or any type of, control. Now, again, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy out there that the government's controlling our thoughts and minds, but they do have patents on such technologies if they wanted to do that. And if you are a conspiracy theorist and you believe that they definitely are impacting us, what better thing than to have a population that's not quite on their game? It's like you're in a boxing match, but the guy you're boxing has a raging hangover. He's not really fighting you fairly, right? You got an advantage that he doesn't because he's physically inept at that point. It's kind of the same thing. And we're talking about wildfires. There are chemicals produced by the fire itself, as well as the extinguishing of that fire. So here's a clip on some of the chemicals produced by wildfires.
As a fire rages, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and fine particulate matter enter the air. These extremely tiny particles are referred to as PM 2.5. Essentially, they measure 2.5 microns or less in diameter. These particles are problematic because they're small enough to enter our lungs and affect the way we breathe. They can even be small enough to enter into our bloodstream and lead to inflammation. We take a look at a study done in BC. Researchers monitored how long it would take for one's health to be affected by PM 2.5. The results, just 1 hour. The same study also made a link to PM 2.5 negatively impacting diabetes. Could breathing in smoke from one wildfire event mean lung damage for life? That study is yet to be done in humans.
The study of monkeys from a wildfire episode in California, those primates had residual lung function problems for their entire lives after this acute episode. So I know that researchers in Australia and in BC are going to be doing follow-up studies, but for now, we really don't know what the long-term impacts are of acute exposures to wildfire smoke, particularly if they start to happen more often.
I want to share some data with you guys real quick so that we can put this together, because I don't think we're connecting climate change, global warming with this increase in wildfires properly. Again, a lot of people don't have the information. A lot of scientists, they present it in a pretty dry way. So hopefully this doesn't sound too dry, although it can with the details. But so there's a couple of facts here. Temperatures have risen about 1.18 degrees Celsius since the late 19th centuries. It doesn't seem like much, but on a global scale, those temperatures have real effects, and I'm going to talk about those in a second. So the last decade was the warmest on record. Ice sheets are shrinking. Ice on rivers and lakes is breaking earlier every year, and plants and animals ranges are shifting. So their ecosystems are changing dramatically from some of the other organisms on this planet. Sea levels have risen by about 20 centimeters. Again, doesn't sound like much, but we're talking about We're talking about the sea, the ocean. Like, it's not like a lake or like a bowl of water. This is the entire world's ecosystem that's being affected. This increase has it happened over the last century, of course. So over the last 100 years, this is the effect of human caused climate change. That 20 centimeters over the last century, the rate has nearly doubled in the last 2 decades. The frequency of extreme weather events like hurricanes, heat waves, wildfires, they've all increased, and they're expected to increase even more in the future. So we got a lot more problematic things to happen. And as a consequence, talking about wildfires, they're going to become more intense. They're more likely in regions that are experiencing droughts and heat waves, conditions that are becoming more common, of course, because of this global warming, because of climate change. And yes, this is a thing that people don't. I worry about the information that's being presented and the way that people are kind of presenting it. These are real global problems that your children and your grandchildren are going to have to experience on a visceral level. We're seeing the beginning, the beginning growing pains, the birthing pains of something that could be catastrophic. I remember reading an article a few months ago that likened the coming climate crisis and the next generation or two to that movie. What was it called? Oh my gosh, it was a movie about essentially how the weather is going to destroy the whole freaking world. They likened it. Scientists, climate scientists. By the way, I believe it was like 90% of climate scientists agree that there are these global changes, these climate changes. It's not political. It's not subjective. It is a fact that we're experiencing some serious problems here. I know people make fun of Greta, Thunberg or whatever, which I get it. It's a pretty interesting dynamic for that kid to come out here. But let me tell you something. In my opinion, she's a badass because she's out there putting herself out there to fight against the narrative that's. I mean, it's very difficult to convince people to believe in something they can't ultimately experience right now. They need to see, if they don't see a tidal wave wiping out, Thailand or whatever, everything's fine. If they don't see it, a hurricane wiping out flooding all of Florida to become uninhabitable, it's not that big of a. They don't see it yet, but we're seeing the growing pains, we're seeing the birthing pains, and if we're not paying attention, it might not be us that suffers. But our kids will, and our kids' kids definitely will.
That's the big thing. If you look at the graph of this thing, it is getting more and more and more. So we're in sort of the middle of this where we go, well, it can't be that bad. My grandma lived to 80 or whatever, but it's the next generation, the generation after.
Yeah.
At some point, things will get out of hand where we cannot reverse it. And we don't even know what that spiral looks like. They're using, simulation software to figure out how bad that could be. And you don't want to see what the potential outcomes are of a climate that's out of control with not a damn thing we can do about it. The earth will reclaim itself pretty quick and it'll go back to the way it was before we were here, But a big thing about these fires is they produce what's called VOCs, volatile organic compounds.
Yep.
So essentially, these compounds turn into gases after vaporizing from different solids or liquids, and they change state. And concentrated doses of VOCs may not produce immediate side effects, but, you can get things like dizziness, headaches, memory problems, other issues, things that you wouldn't necessarily attribute to the VOCs themselves. Also, most common would be indoor, also existing in the outdoor. VOCs are found in that new car smell, everything from that to the new couch you just bought, even the air freshener or scented candle that you have in your house could all contain these VOCs. Where do they come from? Well, to a small degree, products and materials and things that we make. And here are some examples of VOC sources. So you've got aerosol sprays, cigarettes, or secondhand smoke. If you are a smoker, don't smoke inside your house. A, there's other people in your house that don't need to die. And B, if you're a pack-a-day smoker, you become a 5-pack-a-day smoker because that smoke does not dissipate. And I don't judge anybody, but when you see somebody driving down the road with all 4 windows rolled up having a smoke, I want to punch them in the face, right? Roll the window down. What are you doing? You're making it worse. And unless you just have a death sentence or a death wish, then go nuts. But if you're going to have a bad habit, at least lessen the effect and don't smoke in closed, contained areas with no airflow. Your filters aren't taking it out. Paints, you've probably seen low VOC paint. When I painted the nursery for my daughter, I went and bought a Sherwin-Williams low VOC for that exact reason, because some of these paints can off gas from 5 to 10 years. Now, even though we're using latex paint, not oil-based paint like we did years ago, there is still VOC in latex-based paint, and it off gases, and you may not be able to detect it just by smell. Dry cleaning, big cause of VOCs, new furniture, wood preservatives like treated lumber. You know, when you get those green lumbers, green boards, that's been dipped in some type of a solution. That is a toxic solution. That's why the wood doesn't rot. It's basically formaldehyde that preserves the wood for years to come. So when you build a deck, it doesn't just rot from nature. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper than using cedar, which is naturally rot resistant. So they pressure treat wood, and it is full of VOCs, disinfectants, moth repellents, air fresheners, your fuel, glues, pesticides, building materials, faux and synthetic fabrics. So you might have a faux fur something that could contain VOCs, markers and inks, you know, Sharpie smell. That is not good. And office equipment, things like that. And some of the negative effects of this, you have respiratory irritation, headaches, allergies, liver damage, nervous system damage, allergic skin reactions, nausea, cancer, dizziness, asthma, and other breathing difficulties. How are there not warning labels on anything that has a VOC? If you showed people that this bottle of Febreze, and I'm not saying Febreze has this, so don't sue me, Febreze, but if this was on a warning label for Febreze may cause the following, how many people would actually buy that product?
Everybody. People are... Come on, man.
Don't say that. Give people some credit, man. They're not all crazy or stupid.
I love you guys. I love you guys, but come on, we human beings. I mean, I posted on. Okay, so check this out, everyone. I used to work for the water company and look at test people's water before many years ago, and I joked about this last night. But on my Facebook, the finance manager commented, "Marquise, why haven't you done this? Made these changes years ago? You know about this stuff before." I said I was young and dumb. Why would I make any changes when I was just trying to, just live my life and do my job? And I thought I was doing a good thing by helping people with this water. I didn't even consider helping myself with the water. To be totally honest, it didn't even cross my mind. And I feel like a lot of people are, they're just living life. They're just doing what they can do. The idea of adding something extra to their awareness that they have to be concerned about tends to be unsettling, and they don't want to hear it. Or they don't want to make the changes, but we at least want to present that. But I will say earlier, I kind of jumped ahead. I apologize. Before we were talking about with the CO2 emissions and so forth, we were talking about particulate matter. I jumped ahead by mentioning these organic compounds, these VOCs. The VOCs are different. The VOCs come from chemicals and stuff like that that are essentially synthetic or created in some other sources. Whereas the particulate matter comes from like factories, cars, things like that. They're a little bit different. I kind of jumped ahead on that. I apologize.
Yeah. And here's another issue too. We already know that we have typical pollutants that go up in the air. But if you look at those two blue clouds up top, on the left are the primary pollutants like carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. And then they have a photochemical activation. When UV sunlight hits these, now they become things like ozone, sulfuric acid. So the pollution is bad enough, but that photochemical activation makes them even more toxic. And not to mention all the other toxins in our world. But this is why the pollution has gone from bad to worse. It's because there's actually a photochemical exchange. And we talked about, you can get cardiac problems, breathing problems. There are mental problems associated with bad air. Everything from cerebrovascular events, dementia, Alzheimer's, headache, migraines, and epilepsy, neurodevelopmental disorders, overall mental disorders, cognitive dysfunction, Parkinson's disease. And then, you have direct and indirect ones. Essentially, you have neuron damage, the deposit of these things in our endocrine systems, cerebral oxidative stress. So essentially, you have toxins making it to the brain that our bodies can't clear out, autonomic lung arc reflex. So, basically everything. And these are at a nano level in some cases. So they make it right into the bloodstream, and you can't get them out. And that's a big problem. And one thing I want to bring up before we go to break is not only just pollution. There's many industries that are causing this. And one I was surprised by was pesticide. Now, we talked about pesticide and what's in our food, also in water, the fact that your tap water still has pesticides in it, birth control, all that stuff that the water treatment company is not taking out. And Actually, pesticides are creating air pollution just because of the spray. You can see here, the guy's spraying it. How much of that is hitting the plant and how much of that is becoming airborne?
Yeah.
The fact that you need to wear a mask when you spray tells you everything you need to know because it becomes airborne. And, with the pesticides that are created from that, you have things again like VOCs. Many pesticides contain VOCs. They can also generate particulate matter or PM when it's sprayed as a spray or a dust. It can also add those chemical reactions in the atmosphere, like we just showed, and things like agricultural drift. If you got an organic farm down the way from this guy, that stuff is still hitting your farm. In some cases, there is no organic farming because of agricultural drift. Not only does it fly through the air, it gets into the water table, and it contaminates surrounding farms as well, especially if we're talking crop dusting from a plane. Everybody's farm just got sprayed, not only the farmer. And they're not spraying easy to remove chemicals. These aren't water-based pesticides because otherwise, every time it would rain, the farmer would have to pay for a fresh crop dusting, and that's thousands of dollars. So they're spraying oil-based pesticides so that the rain doesn't wash them off. So when you have produce and you rinse it under the tap and you think you washed your apple, you did not. Use soap or use something that can emulsify those oils. Use conditioned water at a higher pH that can literally bond with that and get those. And there are also some chemicals. They're supposed to be safe. You let your produce soak for 30 minutes or whatever, or you spray it on. There's some good ones and bad ones. I looked at a few at the store. Some have chemicals that aren't so savory. Others have natural-based chemicals, potassium sorbate and things like that can do that for you. But it's not enough to just rinse them with water because they are oil-based. So again, nobody knows this. We don't even know this stuff. We're science buffs. We take care of our health. We think we're doing better than most. I didn't know that the pesticides were oil-based. Like, how are you going to get that off broccoli? That's like a fuzzy mass. You need something to remove that at a molecular level, right?
Yeah, but what bothers, and real quick before we go to break, what bothers me is that we are not considering, and we'll talk about solutions afterwards, but we're thinking more about, if you look at the idea of the farmer spraying his crops with pesticides, the point is to increase crop yield and decrease the loss for the purpose of selling that stuff. Now, I'm not saying that farmers are bad. They are the lifeblood of the food industry for the most part. But the problem is that there's a pressure on them in order for them to survive, by the way. They have to have an increase in the yield. Yeah. So what they do is they have to take these measures. Not all farmers do this, by the way. Some farms are, they don't use any of these pesticides, or they use a different alternative for them. However, the problem is that the ones that produce the most for all these mega corporations like Walmart, they're using them along with GMOs and so on and so forth. So we just have to kind of, it's about shifting our view about our priorities to being more humanistic focused. How do we survive as a species versus how do we profit? We have to eliminate the profit incentive. It is the root of all evil. What is it? The quote is, the love of money is the root of all evil. The love, not just money itself. It's the love of it. And I think that the way that our system is structured, as society is structured today, it is to love profit, money, things, stuff. And the value of human life is secondary, if not last, in the list of priorities for human civilization.
Yeah, that's a repeating theme. Everything from what the food production companies are allowed to put in our food, along to the water and the air. It's hard not to be a little conspiratorial when you see that companies know, there's studies for years they've known, the law hasn't changed to make them change. And in some cases, like the FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. So the same body regulating big pharma that allows big pharma to do things like raise insulin costs 4,000%. That's allowed by the FDA. And they're also the same people setting limits on what goes in your food. Seems to me like there's a big business of sick people. And if you could maybe make them sick at an earlier age, you now have a customer for life. I mean, when you have diabetes, you're literally on insulin the rest of your life. You don't get cured from that sort of thing. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. So I'm not suggesting that somebody's intentionally doing it. But if you just look at the facts kind of speak for themselves. Even when being notified that, hey, there's a problem with lead in baby formula, they did nothing to change it. So if you haven't seen our What's in Our Food or What's in Our Water episodes, please watch them. They're incredibly important. And we didn't know half of this stuff. And a lot of people that have watched it, we've got feedback as well. And they're like, well, I had no idea this is even allowed to go on, because we're trusting beings. We want to believe that we're not a third world country, so we don't have those issues. We're not like India or China or parts of Africa. How is this allowed to happen in North America? It is rampant, and the onus is on you. Even, websites like ewg.org, where you can go and test your local water, there's a disclaimer right on the site. Legal may not equal safe, and some of these limits have not been adjusted in over 20 years.
Yep.
So it's like, we're good. We warned you. Your water's shit, but hey, we told you so. Like, that's not good enough. And, we like to do this show to inspire and educate people. We don't run any commercials or ads. It's about the information. It's not about the show. And at least we feel good doing our part, making as much noise as we can, that everybody needs to make some noise about this topic. And hopefully we get somewhere with it in the future. So when we get home, we're going to talk about in-home pollution, as well as some of the things that you wouldn't realize could be toxic. We're going to talk about air filtration, proper air filtration, what that looks like, and proactive steps you can take to keep your family safe. So everybody, grab a refill. Chat is on fire as usual. By the way, we love our chat. So polite. Yeah. Everybody shares insightful stories. During our What's in Our Food episode, people were sharing examples of their own life where food toxicity had caused issues, allergies. In some cases, people got chronic illnesses from things that doctors were like, no, it's okay. Keep having high fructose corn syrup. You'll build a dependence to it. And then eventually it's like it caused major issues with people. So we love the chat. They're always interactive, always some new faces every week too. So we really appreciate getting your feedback, and anyone out there that wants to give us some additional info. If you're an expert in this field, leave us a note in the comments or reach out to us. We do have a brand new website, which is kind of cool. So you can check us out,
awesome.
quantumladderpodcast.com. You can follow us on Facebook, of course, and other social media. And if you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do so. It makes a difference. YouTube and all these platforms will show us to more people. And if you do like our show, give us a thumbs up. It means a lot. And we're going to take our 5-minute break here, and we'll see everybody back here in just a few minutes. And we are back with the second half of Quantum Matter Podcast, talking about what is in our air today. We mentioned forest fire seasons are getting worse and worse all the time. But before we get into home air pollution and things we can do in that respect, I got one more clip here on driving in poor air quality, things you can do to limit your exposure when it is a bad fire season.
Here are some tips to help keep you healthy while you're driving when the air quality is unhealthy in your area. The first thing that's important is to make sure that you keep your windows closed at all times and minimize the amount of time that you have your doors open, because you don't want to bring that outside air into your car. If you've got a garage, keep that closed at all times and use that as your only point of entry into your home. Any other points of entry that you keep opening is going to make your indoor air quality worse. If you're not familiar with this symbol, that is the recirculation mode that you can find on your car. So when you turn on your car, you want to press that button, make sure that mode is turned on so that the air is circulating from inside your car. You don't want to take air from the outside and blow it in, because that's going to create worse air quality for you while you're driving. Also, you might want to consider changing your cabin air filter that filters out particles from the outside coming into your car. That's going to depend on what car you have and how old it is, but manufacturers recommend usually between about 10 to 30,000 miles to change it anyways. But when we have these very unhealthy conditions, you might want to consider changing it. You could actually do this yourself by looking up online what to do, and you can buy the filter yourself or have somebody do it for you. So I hope these tips are helpful. If you have further questions, leave it in the comment section. Follow for more information, and be well.
And one note to add to that, it's actually not good for CO2. Yes, it might filter particulate outside, but if you drive for an extended period of time with your car and recirculate, the carbon dioxide levels from you exhaling are actually 20 times higher than they would be outside. And bear in mind, too, populated cities, it doesn't need to be bad fire season or noticeable bad air. Just the pollution from people's exhaust and tailpipes. If you're driving in the summer with your windows down, your air is worse on the outside than it would be on the inside. So just to keep in mind, it's sad. There really isn't a way to escape it, unfortunately. And that's a problem, right? So let's get into indoor home air pollution. Man, there's a lot. So let's start at the outside. As he mentioned, keep your garage doors closed. So that's your only point of entry. Every time you open and close a door, you're effectively exchanging good air for bad air. Even your chimney, VOCs, emissions, particulate matter, odors, and pathogens can come in or be expelled from your house. So you could be producing it and uptaking it. In the bathroom, you've got mildew, mold, microbial pathogens. Kitchen, you've got your cooking appliances, cooking smoke, cleaning products, odors, mold, mildew, other microbial pathogens. Living room, again, VOCs from paint, furniture, varnishes, carpet, pet hair dander. Your bedroom, hairspray, perfumes, nail polish, furniture, carpet, upholstery, dust mites, poor ventilation, even the insulation and dust in your attic. Old storage boxes and stuff, they're going to collect that crap. And extreme heat and humidity and roof leaks, as we mentioned earlier, can lead to mold as well. And that's not the only list. You've also got what do we got here? That cleaning products we mentioned, cooking devices. Having a gas stove will actually produce pollutants in your house. It does not burn 100%. A lot of furnaces run on fuel oil. It's basically a version of diesel. So you're burning diesel, and although you may have a good ventilation system, some of that is still coming back in your house. Tobacco smoke, as we mentioned earlier, don't smoke in your house. It's way worse than just smoking. Air conditioning units are unable to remove VOCs. They just recirculate them room to room. They might actually help exacerbate the problem because they're now taking VOCs from a bad area and sending it to every other area of your house. I don't know if I want to breathe anymore, Marquise.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I didn't mean. I apologize for the little giggle there, but like, it just feels like holy crap? Like what? You can't, it's everywhere. There's problems with just our way of life. And I want to pull some facts from the WHO. Okay.
Yeah.
So according to the WHO, it's actually 3.8 million premature deaths annually from indoor air pollution. So that's something
not
that
2.2 like that initial study.
This is worldwide. This is worldwide.
Yeah.
It's 3.8 worldwide. Major indoor pollutants include particulate matter. So we talked about some of that from the outside. So the carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, and the volatile organic compounds of VO2. So both of those sources of toxins are in your air in your home versus just having mostly one of them, outside, and then being in an open area where there isn't a contained version of these particulates and these VOCs. So the sources you mentioned are cooking, heating, tobacco, and building material. These old beat down houses that people love so much, probably not the healthiest for you. The fact that we use the stoves, people were talking about these gas stoves. I'll never listen. I laugh because there was a debate in the US about like gas stoves. Like, I'll never get rid of my gas stoves. The government's not going to take it from me. First of all, I don't think that the government wants to take the gas stoves. I think it's more like an encouragement of not exposing you and your family to toxic organic these VOCs. It's unfortunate that again these issues are being used against us for the benefit of people that don't even care about us. Forget about the political. This is why I hate politics, because politics pollutes, pun intended, and perverts just reality, and your health and your well-being, your family's well-being, the future generations' well-being, humanity. Our survival depends on us having a shared sense of objective reality versus a political perspective. Who cares? I don't even think it's just so irrelevant that we focus on this political stuff. You're going to be unhealthy. You're going to be even more unhealthy with the gas stove. Nobody's going to take it from you, but it's better for you and your family that we just change the dynamic of how we live our lives and what the appliances that we use and everything, because they're not going to do it. They, as in the people that make decisions for what happens to civilization, they're not going to do it for us. Some of them may be trying to, but really they're not. Like, it's just all gestures. It's all posturing and grandstanding. There's no real change that's coming. It's up to us to make these changes. And again, I find it unfortunate that we've politicized the idea of just like healthy living. The WHO also highlights that stroke, heart disease, and lung cancer, these are linked to indoor pollution. And we talked about some of those other health effects as well: asthma, breathing problems, neurological issues, like your brain development, your children's brain development. These things are, again, it's not funny, but it's just crazy that people have been convinced that we shouldn't be concerned about these things for some very, interesting reasons. It's crazy. It's crazy.
You're absolutely right about all of the above. And I know half of our audience is a European-based audience. I think just about everybody's got a gas burner somewhere in Europe, right?
Yeah.
They actually use gas more than electric and more than North America. So if you're listening to us from the UK or somewhere else in Europe, I know it's popular belief. Oh, there's nothing wrong with this. We've had gas stoves for 100 years, blah, blah, blah. Well, do a little bit of research. Don't take our word for it. You see what kind of crap comes out of a gas stove. You're burning fossil fuels, and essentially, even though it burns clear, much better than gasoline, it is not burning 100% efficient. There is no such thing as burning fossil fuels with no pollution. The only difference is you're putting that pollution in your house on a regular basis, and you're not ventilating that stuff out. So the concentration levels build. So our advice is get a meter, and we can talk about in-home air quality meters shortly. But here's a little clip on 4 ways to improve the indoor air quality of wherever you are.
Breathing clean air is absolutely important for our health. The EPA estimates that over 130 million Americans live in areas of poor air quality and pollution. So what are some of the ways you can improve the air quality in your home? Here's 4 tips. Tip 1 is regular cleaning and maintenance of air ducts and filters. All kinds of pollutants and allergens and particles accumulate in your air ducts of your heating and cooling system. So regular maintenance and replacing of your filters will keep your ducts clean and improve the overall quality of air inside your home. The second tip is to regularly clean your rugs, carpets, and windows. These are areas that can harbor dust mites, allergens, pollutants, pet dander, and more. And when you step on these things or open your window, you're circulating all those particles into the air. Third tip is to install an air purifying system such as a HEPA filter. HEPA stands for High Efficiency Particulate Air Filter, and it could be installed on your current HVAC system, or you could just buy a standalone device. What this does is filter 99% of allergens pollutants and particles from the air, which it purifies the air and allows for a safe, clean breathing environment. Fourth tip is to stay informed and monitor the air quality alerts in your area. Use reputable sources such as weather.com or government apps in order to understand what's going on with the air quality in your area and take the appropriate measures such as keeping windows closed, limiting outdoor activity, or turning your air purifiers up higher if you need to.
My air purifier is on max, but just to keep me
Now,
clear here, it's
one thing about HEPA filters, again,
Yeah.
marketing sneaks its dirty little Weasley hands in there. There are true HEPA and medical grade HEPA.
Mhm.
Those are the real HEPA filters. A lot of these companies are using proprietary names for their filters, like Enviro HEPA or,
Yeah.
you know, HEPA Max or anything like that that's giving them the appearance of a unique HEPA filter. It is not a true HEPA filter. It is at a lesser micron level. They're still getting away with using that through some loophole, using the word HEPA, but you want true HEPA or medical grade HEPA because it
Mhm.
filters a lot more than, you know, HEPA Max 2.0. That's just some made up nonsense from some company that's trying to look like they have better filtration than others. And there are a lot of games these companies play. We'll get into some of the crap that, you know, some filters don't cause. And in fact, some filters cause more problems than good. And here's another one on reducing air pollution on our home, and then we can go into some solutions.
Indoor air quality can be more polluted than outdoor air. Here's how to improve the air quality inside of our homes. First, reduce or eliminate the sources of pollution, like smoking and burning incense and candles inside. Even fireplaces and wood-burning stoves contribute to poorer indoor air quality, especially if they aren't properly installed and maintained. Gas ranges can also emit toxins like nitrogen oxides into your home. Turn on the exhaust fan when you're cooking. If you don't have one, open your windows and run a regular fan. Next, remove dust and other small particles. Dust might not sound that scary, but potentially dangerous volatile organic compounds emitted from things like furniture and cleaners can cling to dust particles. Air purifiers can help. We test air purifiers to see how well they remove small particles like dust, pollen, and smoke. This blue air purifier is among the best at removing those small particles. Keep tabs on your home's humidity levels. Between 30 and 60% is ideal. An inexpensive hygrometer or humidity sensor can help gauge humidity levels in a room. In the drier winter months, you may even want a humidifier to help add moisture. But too much moisture can promote mold growth, and that's not good for air quality. A dehumidifier like this Midia can help. And don't forget, a working carbon monoxide detector like this one from First Alert is a must in any home to alert you and keep you safe from carbon monoxide exposure.
Yeah, we in changing those filters, you have to do them often because
Yes.
you don't realize how bad. I mean, you look at the filter sometimes. I remember the first time I changed it, it was completely covered in dust.
Yeah.
And I was
again,
like,
just
how
because
is it?
it says the filter will last 3 months, 6 months, a year, that's completely dependent on the type of air you're asking this
Yeah.
machine to pollute
Yeah.
or to filter. So the higher the pollutant, the more often you're going to have to change your filter. Same with water. If you're using a filtration system and you got really bad water, the filters are going to clog up sooner than not. So just because it says 6 months doesn't necessarily mean it's 6 months. If you have a high percentage of dust, pets in the house, you know, older materials, fibers, things like that, I would recommend inspecting the filter. And even if that means a month and a half or 2 months, change it. It's not
Yep.
working properly if it's
Yep.
not at its optimal performance.
Yeah.
Some people say, well, I have a purifier at home, you know, I'm good. Well, not all purifiers are the same.
Yep.
And here are some, I'm going to show you that. Here's air ionizers. And I'm guilty. I had one of these in my house. I think you did too, Marquise.
I did, yeah.
These are not the air filters you want, folks.
You need to stop using this type of air purifier. Seriously, this device could be making the air in your home worse. It's called an ionizer and it negatively charges the oxygen in your air. These negative ions attach themselves to dust, mold, and it makes them heavy so they fall to the ground. The problem is that this process creates ozone. Even small amounts of ozone can irritate the lungs. This is terrible for anyone with asthma or any respiratory illnesses. But it's not just ozone you need to be worried about. This 2008 study showed that using ionizers actually increased the amount of volatile organic compounds in the air. Also known as VOCs, these are man-made chemical gases that are linked to a ton of health problems. Thankfully, these ionizers are no longer sold thanks to a change in the law, but unfortunately, many will still be running in American homes. It's time to replace these dangerous devices. We need to stop.
America, listen, everybody. I'm an American, and I love America. I love America.
America.
All right, I grew up here all my life. Let me tell you something right now. All seriousness, like
And Matthew McConaughey joins the show, folks.
what bothers
all
me
right.
all right. What bothers me about just the mindset of the general public here is that there's this like rough and tumble. It's like, like I want my diesel truck, I like my diesel truck and my
Put oil
who
on
needs
my
a purifier
cornflakes.
and give me that oil and I want to bathe in it. It's almost like the things that can kill you. There's like it's a dragon in a video game and they want to fight it. Like I want to show how tough I am as an American that I can like encounter these things in my. But again, it's not just you; it's also your children, and you're not raising a bunch of wussies by protecting them from like just like toxins, things that affect your biology and not your mindset. You can Gary V your way through like a course, an educational course, and you can Gary V your way, to learning a new skill and to becoming successful in this. But you can't Gary V your way against toxins. Try Gary Ving your way out of a forest, out of the after effects of a forest fire, or Gary Ving your way from the effects of cancer. Or you can't do that. And no offense to Gary V, by the way, I think he's a cool dude. I'm just saying, it only, that mindset only goes so far because we're humans. We have biology. There are effects on our biology from our environment, and you can't. Again, you're not going to be able to get your way out. You're not going to be able to think your way through these things.
Yeah, you can't meditate your way through air pollution. It ain't going to work.
You can't do.
You
can't power of attraction. Good health. Like you can't. If you were in Chernobyl and you tried that stuff there, it's not going to work. Okay, it's not going to work. The people of 3 Mile Island are still experiencing, the ones that were immediately affected by that are still experiencing like cancers and tumors and all kinds of weird like genetic anomalies because of what happened there, and it didn't even have a full nuclear meltdown. So you can't do it. You can't fight. You have to fight it through things like, and we'll talk about the solutions here in a moment. I don't want to jump ahead, but
just to touch on what he was saying about those air ionizers negatively charging oxygen and creating ozone. There is ozone in the ozone layer. Again, we're talking about good ozone and bad ozone. And here is another video clip talking about how ozone actually makes mold worse. So if you do have a mold issue, anything to do with ozone machines, I know they're popular. A lot of auto detailing shops will use an ozonator. If your car smells like smoke or, wet dog, they'll spray a solution in the air, put this UV light, which produces ozone in the car, let it run for hours, and it effectively kills the smell for a short amount of time. It's not perfect, but it does remove some of that through the process of the UV light. But ozone is not good, and here's why.
I use an ozone machine in my house to kill the mold spores. On one hand, yes, an ozone machine does kill every living organism, but when you put mold spores into an environment where there's ozone, the ozone actually makes one mold spore explode into many, therefore actually making the problem worse.
Well,
so instead of shooting a fly with a pistol, you're shooting a fly with a shotgun, and you have multiple pieces now. Yeah, and that becomes airborne. You walk on the carpet. It's a real sunny day, and it's creating a beam of light in through your living room. And you look at it the right way, you could see things. Even if you have very clean air, you always see something floating, dust or whatever. Well, walk across that carpet and then take a look at it, and you'll see this slow rise of all this crap on your floors or whatever you just walk through, and we're breathing that in. Even microplastics are a big problem. We've talked about this before. Essentially in the environment, it's not just, water bottles floating around in the ocean. It's discarded fishing gear, marine coatings, just garbage produced by the marine industry, wearing and washing your clothing. Those fibers break down. Most of our clothing, unless you're wearing pure organic cotton or hemp, you have some polyester or some rayon or something in there, that is plastic. And those fibers break down so small, they then become airborne. We can breathe them in. Personal care, AstroTurf, automotive tires and brakes, the road markings, even sewers and sludge. And this is how it happens. So you have long range transport of these very fine particles. You have sea spray. I never even thought of this. There's plastics in the ocean. The ocean turns into a spray. It is also containing plastic.
Jeez.
And that blows back, right? You have soil emissions, landfill erosion, just the stuff that's in your brakes. It used to be asbestos. I don't know if it still is, but brake pads do decay. They go into a very fine black dust that gets on the roads. Car go by, they bring that up. And we're not talking about those little pellets that we've all seen when they're like, hey, in the ocean, these bottles are breaking down these little marbles. We're talking about stuff this size. That's a finger. If you were to just blow, all of those things would just take off. Like it's at a dust level or smaller. And even in some cases, now we're witnessing plastics decaying into the micro level and now the nano level that you would need an electron scanning microscope just to see the damn thing. It is that small. And microplastics in the air, a big deal. I mean, we experienced this with our water episode and our food episode. I never thought we got plastic in the air, but we do. I mean, a microplastic is defined as anything smaller than 5 millimeters. And they will take 1,000 years for non-disposable items or non-biodegradable items like plastic bags, 1,000 years to degrade. And instead of breaking down completely, micro and nanoplastics become absorbed by the earth. They infiltrate the microbiome of the planet, the mycelium. Animals eat those plants. We eat the animals. The cycle continues. So it's a very big deal. I mean, here it is in the food chain. So things like facial scrubs, shaving cream, toothpaste, baby products, deodorants, eyeshadow, mascara, liquid makeup, paints, laundry stuff, synthetic turf, all that gets into the fresh water. It promotes genetic exchange. So it's actually having an epigenetic effect on the microorganisms out there. And these microorganisms take in these small plastics right at the sort of the plankton level of the ocean. Plankton is eaten by slightly bigger fish, and then those fish are eaten by slightly bigger fish. And eventually the big fish wind up with things like gastrointestinal deformities, growth retardation, and even with heavy metals that build up in the livers of these animals. They are basically becoming the filters for the ocean. It's, we're not cleaning it out. So animals' natural filtration systems are what's collecting all this stuff. And I mean, this was a clip you found here, Marquise. We eat it, we drink it, we breathe it. Over 94% of the microplastics we are ingesting is from bottled water. Stop drinking bottled water. Even if it says it's the cleanest water on the planet, it might be, but as soon as you put that in a bottle and any kind of light hits that, you are encouraging chemicals to leach out, and as well, particulates at this size, which you would never see without a microscope. Beer has 32% of our uptake. I mean, come on. Beer, microplastic? The air, tap water, seafood, even things like sugar, salt, and honey, they can't differentiate a white particle from what could be a salt or a sugar particle. So essentially, it's in everything. And if we don't pay attention to that, it's just going to get worse, right? And there are ways you can filter microplastics out. Maybe we'll talk about that one day in a different episode. And then you found something on black carbon.
Yeah, this is
So maybe you could take us through this, Marquise. Black carbon.
Yeah, so this is what I didn't know that it was called black carbon, but essentially black carbon, also known as soot. It's a compound of fine particulate air pollution. It's a light absorbing particle that contributes to climate change by releasing heat, energy into the atmosphere. It's the second most important contributor to global warming and is considered a short-lived climate pollutant. So smog, essentially, smog is what it is. You get it from factories, from cars, from all this very dense, thick fog, or this dense, thick cloud of smoke that looks like you see coming out of some of those giant facilities.
Yeah.
That's where we get those factories. That's the smog. That's the black carbon. That stuff is extremely toxic to the planet. And it's just all part of that cycle that we were talking about. It gets trapped in the ozone, and what happens is, so this is what, let me just read this real quick, and I'm going to have to get close, but the lifetime in the atmosphere is up to 2 weeks. Since black carbon does not last long in the atmosphere, its efforts to reduce it they'll bring immediate benefits for the climate and human health. If we could fix this issue by, of course, not using these pollutants, not having these different types of energy systems that we use today, including in your home as well, like air conditioning, which I know this sounds crazy, but these things contribute to black carbon in our atmosphere. I know they have a short lifespan, but they are everywhere. They're in everything that we use, all of our electronics, essentially, that produce any kind of smoke, that is. They're producing smog. They're producing black carbon. It's crazy. I didn't even know. You can see some of it in the exhaust pipe of your car. That black, that's the black carbon. When you're walking,
also brake dust in your auto rims, that's the same thing. It's a black carbon. That is the particulate matter. At least that is at a level big enough micron size we can see with the naked eye. It's the stuff we can't see that's the real problem, because we have a false sense of I'm good. There's no dust here. I vacuum off in like I'm doing okay. May not be the case. And we wanted to see how bad pollution was worldwide. How are we in the Western hemisphere, in particular in North America? How are we compared to some other parts of the world? So essentially, this was the pollution map we found. So cities like New York and Los Angeles are relatively low, comparatively speaking. My hometown of Toronto isn't that far off of New York. Vancouver, where I live now, is better than where it used to be in Toronto, but still not better. But like, look at Dubai and Mumbai.
Yeah,
India by far is the greatest polluter on the face of the earth. It's sad. I mentioned in a couple other episodes that thoracic surgeons are saying they don't see pink lungs in India. Not even kids have clean lungs anymore because the air is so bad. It's the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes every day. Like, that's what people are living through day in and day out. It's absolutely disgusting. There should be something done about it. I know it's a poorer country. The country is actually quite wealthy, but overpopulation and the disparity between rich and poor is massive in that country. And they even have a caste system, which effectively prevents you from ever getting out of that. If you're poor, you're always going to be seen as poor. You will always be poor. And some people estimate that while their population is well over 1 billion, they should have anywhere between 1,600 and 4,000 air quality monitors. The country has 804. This is as of 2021. So they should have 4,000. They got 800. I'm not saying they're turning a blind eye to this. I mean, how do you turn a blind eye to this? How is this okay? And it's like 2-stroke motorcycles burning oil and gas. It's the heat. Again, we talked about this photochemical exchange that happens in the upper atmosphere. Bad pollution becomes worse pollution. You get that ground level ozone, which is not good. Yeah. And that's what smog effectively is here. And I think I've got a video on ground level.
Yeah, real quick, I got to say, I just want to let you guys know, this also, this black carbon, this smog, this soot, it is the second largest cause of CO2 emissions in the world.
Yeah.
So these are, I mean, you're seeing the effects in these heavily populated areas because of industrialization, of course. They don't have any regulations. They're sickeningly underprepared or underwhelmed when it comes to their preventative measures, or at least their monitoring systems. They don't even have the way to monitor to be able to find out how big the problem is. You can see it, but they can't, the data to, unequivocally, overwhelmingly say, okay, we're all going to die soon. Not literally, but maybe, but it's there, but the measures, they're not being taken. This is sick, man.
Yeah. And we're not picking on India. This is just facts.
No, of course not.
If you don't believe us, go do your own research. You can fact check anything. All of these things have multiple sources. I got them all right here. If anybody ever calls us out, we can provide you where this data is coming from.
For sure.
We're using reputable sources, scientific studies, some government reports, but not all. Sometimes they try to whitewash this material to make it look happier. And, we're hoping by 2030, it'll only go down to this. Okay, what is it at now? Don't tell me what you're hoping it's going to be. So it can be challenging to get the goods. But I got a quick clip here, 1:20, just on air pollution in India.
What you see around me is a thick, dense layer of pollution. The air outside is so toxic that even with a mask on, I can taste it. If you're out for too long, the eyes begin to burn and the throat hurts. Around this time every year, this smog shrouds India's capital city, obscuring the skyline and putting more than 20 million people at risk. On a bad day, New Delhi's pollution levels are nearly 80 times the limit recommended by the World Health Organization. So why is Delhi one of the most polluted cities in the world? One major factor is crop burning, which can be better understood from above. Satellite images shared by NASA show thousands of fires set by farmers over the last few weeks in Delhi's neighboring states. They do this annually to clear the fields after harvest for the next year's crops. Dust from roads and construction sites, vehicle emissions, and industrial pollution are also major contributors to Delhi's toxic air. As winter approaches, the colder air acts as a blanket covering the ground, trapping air pollutants. And as for the geography, Delhi is a landlocked city, limiting options to flush out polluted air. With multiple causes and no one solution, this pollution crisis will not be easy to solve.
Dang, man. I mean, I didn't see that video beforehand, but I was mentioning about the industrialization being the huge issue and a huge factor in this. Listen, I want to be very clear. I believe that technology is the way forward for human civilization. We're at a population density now globally that we need technology in order to survive. We can't say, oh, technology is a problem. Manufacturing is a problem. We understand that, but there are alternatives. The problem isn't the technology. The problem isn't that we have it and that there's industrialization at all. The problem is the way in which we implement these things into our civilization. That is the problem. So the solution isn't to get rid of it. It's to change how we use it. That's pretty much, I mean, that's crazy. This is crazy.
One of the things she mentioned in that video is very important is the fact that a lot of farms will burn off excess every year, even just farms that have like nice shrubs and stuff surrounding. Everybody goes and trims it. They make a big burn pile. Away they go. So I have a video that talks about ground level ozone as a result of forest fires, but effectively the same thing happens with just burning leaves, campfires. I mean, the campfires aren't a massive problem because we're not running 50 million campfires a day every day, whereas with some other things we are. But here's a little more breakdown on how fires actually produce smog and ozone at ground levels.
So it turns out that smoke is not the only problem we have now from wildfires. There's also a connection that they found between wildfires and ground level ozone, which makes it really difficult to breathe. It turns out there's chemicals in the wildfire similar to there might be in cars or coming from factories. And when those chemicals come in contact with very bright sunlight, they create this ground level ozone. It's bad for asthma, particularly for kids. And basically it's creating what you would call smog. So we got a double whammy here. You got the wildfire smoke and you also got the smog. It's a problem to keep our eye on.
Listen, our next sponsor is Hazmat. I will be, if you see me wearing one, mind your business. I am just trying to protect my.
We all need one of those Ebola suits.
My goodness.
So we talked about air purifiers. Let's get into some tips if you want to now invest in a purifier, or if you want to double check the quality of the purifier you have in your house. Here are a couple tips on what you should look for when you're getting a new machine.
This is everything you need to know about air purifiers in 60 seconds. If you have a home, it needs an air purifier. It's that simple, at least in the bedroom. All purifiers that have a HEPA filter will do their job eventually. When shopping for one, make sure that it's really a true HEPA filter, not one of those proprietary ones. As long as it's HEPA, you're good. Most of the cost of air purifiers are long tail, the replacement filters. So take this into account when choosing your unit. It's way better to get multiple small air purifiers for each room instead of one big one and hope that it purifies the whole house. It doesn't. Air purifiers don't work well for other rooms. Our first one was a Levoit from Amazon, then we upgraded to Vinix, which we had for a few years, and now I've finally replaced all of ours with Kobe, and I can confidently recommend all three of these brands. And last but not least, choose ones that don't have built-in ionizers. These will dry out your air and generate unwanted ozone. Plus, they're deadly for small pets.
Yeah, you animal lovers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And our pets are home even when we're out. They could be trapped in that all day, all night, especially if they're indoor only animals. And it's not just air filters. There are some natural things you can do, certain plants that will improve your air. I had one years ago called a crispy wave. It looks sort of like wrinkly lettuce on a fern leaf, but apparently that did something to purify the air. And here are 5 plants that will do the same.
Here are 5 indoor plants that can help improve the air quality of your home. Hi, I'm Terry. I'm an intuitive designer, a house healer, and a holistic interior designer. Number 1, English ivy. English ivy is a very big one in improving air quality of your home. It's a really common plant. I have one here on my shelf. It's a climbing plant. It's been around for forever in interiors. It works really well. It's also said to improve the mold levels in your home, so that's also a really cool part about it too. Number 2, the spider plant. The spider plant is another common plant. It's really easy to grow, to maintain. Not only does it improve air quality, but it is also said to help with mold levels and with dust, so great for those that have allergies. Number 3, the Chinese evergreen. The Chinese evergreen, not only does it purify the air, but the longer it stays within a certain space in your home, the more purifying it gets. Number 4, aloe vera. Aloe vera is a plant that I love because not only is it air purifying, but it's also something that you can use on cuts, sunburns. I use it all the time. I have a big aloe vera plant. I love it, and it's something that is great for purifying your air, and it has so many different things that can be beneficial to you in your home. Number 5, the peace lily. The peace lily, not only does it purify the air, it is easy to maintain, it looks really pretty, and it is also said to help with mold levels in your home.
I like that she said she's a home healer. That's a pretty cool occupation.
That's right. Right? I mean, who doesn't need healing in their home?
We all need some healing in our homes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about monitors. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I was just going to continue to pontificate myself. So just, go ahead.
Okay. We mentioned air quality monitors. There are such things, everything that just measures or everything from just basic CO levels all the way up to particulate and other things, ozone and things like that. So here are, here's a guy just talking about how he uses his monitors and, how they work.
That's why everyone needs an air quality monitor. I keep this in a few places in my home to monitor the amount of CO2 in any room I'm in. Studies show that when CO2 levels go above 1,000, your cognitive abilities decrease by 15%. And when they go up to 1,400, your cognitive abilities decrease by 50%. This means you're half as smart when CO2 levels are this high. I just monitor the levels when I'm working, especially, I'm doing creative stuff. I'm out here making money, doing shit, and it takes a lot of brain power. So I want to make sure my brain is functioning as optimal as possible. So as soon as this starts to creep up, open some windows, maybe I'll go outside for a minute, take a walk, or maybe even turn on the air conditioner, whatever I got to do to keep this down, because there's a noticeable drop in both energy and cognitive ability once the levels start to go super high.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. I need one of those.
I don't have ones you can buy. Again, cheap, beware. You get what you pay for. A lot of Amazon. I've recently invested in a bunch of water testing tools just because I've been putting the H2 water machine through a battery of tests, and some of the sensors are downright crap. They'll give you false readings. And it's like there's a $50 sensor from Amazon that probably doesn't work. The next level up is like a $600 one that definitely works, right? So sometimes there is a bit of an investment. So do your research, read reviews, things like that, and try it. It's better than having nothing, I suppose. But some of these aren't very technologically advanced. Like you don't need a $300 air tester. You can get away with relatively cheap sensors because what they're looking for is relatively easy for the device to find. It's not that big a deal. And I have one more clip from a lady. We've showed some of her clips on previous episodes. I think it was water. She explained on our water episode, she went to that EWG site, saw there was like 400 times the level of arsenic and haloacetic acids and all these carcinogens in her water. So she did actually a little video on 4 things to consider when buying anything to improve the air quality of your house.
Here are the 4 things that matter most when it comes to buying an air purifier for your home. Number 1 is filter capability. We are looking for a system that has either an ultra HEPA filter or a medical grade HEPA filter. Most of the ones that you see sold in stores are going to be a true HEPA filter, which is nowhere near as powerful as the last two that I mentioned. Second thing is the room size. This is always going to be stated on the box, and it does make a difference. So make sure you're buying the correct size purifier for whichever room you are having it in. Third thing is it needs to be a sealed system. Luckily, most of them on the market are sealed. This means that the contaminants that are captured will not be released back into the air. And then of course, the one that most of us worry about the most, price. Because I have reviewed about 50-ish different purifiers, I can pretty much tell the difference right off the bat now if the claims that they're making are worth the money or not worth the money. So I want to share my top 3 recommendations that I know are worth the money. All right, so here are my top 3 suggestions. 1 is Air Doctor, 2 IQ Air, and 3 Austin Air. And these are the things that differentiate them. As always, I am happy to answer your questions and help you find the best filter for your home. If you do have questions, please feel free to message me. I really am happy to help.
And her channel is called Going Toxless, if anybody wants to see more about that. And sorry, I was incorrect when I said earlier you want to get a true HEPA or medical grade. It's ultra HEPA or medical grade that really gives you the maximum performance. So keep in mind, and if it doesn't say, assume it doesn't have, because if you're making a product that has the ultra grade HEPA, you're damn sure you're going to put it on the box because that's a huge selling feature, especially for anybody who's now educated and is looking for that. So that's essentially what I've got left on air purifiers. The final thing we can talk about, things we can do to be responsible ourselves, things like choose a low pollution vehicle. Unfortunately, there is no such a thing yet. Electric cars are not the solution. There is more than triple the amount of pollution caused by lithium mining than even burning coal. So lithium mining is 3 times dirtier than burning coal. There is no low pollution vehicle other than a bicycle. Walk, bike, or take the bus definitely would help. Refuel in the evening time. So apparently gasoline vapors don't spread as much when it's cooler out. So it prevents, and you don't have the sun, so you don't get any of that photochemical change. Mow your grass in the evening, prevents ozone formation, or use an electric mower so you're not producing any exhaust from that. Compost your yard waste, don't burn it. You know, you compost it, it turns it into nutrient-rich nitrogen available for the soil. When you burn it, it turns it into particulate matter, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and it effectively becomes air pollution. Choose low VOC products, paints and adhesives, things like that. Use as little energy as you can, or use them off-peak hours. And if you can or have the financial ability to, choose renewable energy sources whenever you can. Again, this is going to be something we all have to kind of do a little bit, but it's not going to matter much on our part of the world if this is allowed to go unchecked on the other side. Yeah. It's not going to matter. So I'm not telling other countries how they should, rule or govern their people, but the numbers don't lie. So I'm just saying, like, I thought China was the worst polluter. Beijing would be 29.8, whatever this is measuring, cubic tons or metric tons per year. Mumbai is almost double that. And even the poor people of Mexico City being the highest in North America, the reason for that is because it's located in a valley. The lack of wind intensity in Mexico City leads to reduced diffusion of vehicular pollutants. So it is like a giant valley, and those people don't even know that they have worse air than a neighboring area. And when it comes to places like Dubai, the pollution is created from like all the buildings and the industrial stuff, but the scorching temperatures and excessive humidity, and everybody has a car, right? The excessive reliance on transportation, those 3 things are a toxic recipe to make pollution worse, make it stick around longer, and you keep feeding that problem when you have more pollution coming out of your city. Like, there's more vehicles than people in Dubai, I believe. If there's like 20 million people, there's like 22 million vehicles. I'm guessing at the numbers, but there are some very well-to-do cities in the world with more cars than people. That's a problem. So that's about all I got, Marquise. Any final thoughts from you, brother?
No, I jest a lot, but no one's gonna try to take away your good old, fashion fire burning out back. What do they call those things? Those bonfires. Ain't no one trying to take away your bonfires. But if you can try, if you can do it, one less bonfire a year might help the world. It's crazy because they are fun. Bonfires are fun. People where I live, they're not allowed. I think it's like illegal to burn trash here. Yet, people do it.
Somebody's always throwing a sofa on the bonfire. Okay, that's just how it goes. People in the woods drinking. Next thing you know, it's a tire. It's a friggin' sofa. It's somebody's broken down Jeep. Next thing you know, you got a toxic.
Next thing you know, you're going to tell me I need to start wearing a dress. You liberal sissies. I digest, but all seriousness, please, people, forget about the political crap. Think about your health and your family's health and the future of humanity. I can assure you, the people that are strongest against these measures, even the awareness of these types of problems, they're going to suffer the most, and they tend to suffer the most from these effects because everybody else is trying to at least with the awareness push for change in our civilization, but also taking precautions, are more likely to take precautions. If it ever does come to the point that we've pushed civilization so far over the edge, over the precipice of like whatever that brink of destruction or at least catastrophic change in our climate, I can assure you that you'll suffer the most. And even forget about me, 90+% of scientists say the same thing. Climate scientists say the same thing. And the ones that are not, on the back pocket of Shell or any of the other oil industry, companies that are out there, BP and so forth. So please, for your own sake, for the sake of humanity, just be aware. These are real problems. Look at the data, zoom out, look at NASA's video on YouTube where they see the changes in the world, the deforestation, the types of smog they're seeing in different places. There's a video that says about how NASA scientists were crying, seeing how we've destroyed this planet, how we've pillaged the planet for resources. And I think that we need to, again, be more symbiotic in our way of life and a way of viewing ourselves in this planet before it's too late, if it already isn't.
Yeah. And some of these people running these corporations aren't going to be alive in 30 or 40 years. They really could care less. Not all, but for the most part, everybody's concerned about themselves right now. And so don't expect that some guy who's 60 years old, who's a multi-billionaire, who doesn't really care, don't assume that he's going to make the right decision for you and your family and your kids and your kids' kids. We need to start making some noise, start making it known that we will not buy your products if this is how you conduct business. David Attenborough's been talking about climate change for 30 years. 30 years ago, we still had some time to get some stuff done. We are literally at the point now where it is almost too late, and it might even be too late. I don't know that for sure. We're not going to find out until whatever happens. But like anything, and I think Shane McCarthy, our water expert, said on our last episode that it's cheaper to take care of your health proactively. I mean, some of these require monetary investment, right? Buying filters and things like that. But if not, you're just going to be on meds for the last 10 or 20 years of your life, not healthy, not full of energy, not vibrant, just surviving rather than thriving. So you can pay now or you're going to pay later, but something will happen. And you won't know until you're at that point of, I have cancer in my 50s. What will you then attribute it to? Was it the water you ate? Was it the food the water you drank, the food you ate, the air you breathed? Was it all of it? You won't know. So if you don't take some proactive measures and you keep taking in major toxins in your food, your water, your clothing, you are going to get sick. It is just a matter of time. It is when, not if. And for anybody that is sick or not in the greatest health, immunocompromised, things like that, you especially need to pay attention to this, because if you're older and you have respiratory issues, if you get pneumonia, it's very difficult to overcome that if you're 80 years old and you're in a status of weak health, right? Many people die. They die from pneumonia more than from other illnesses, right? Or they fall, break a hip, they get sick in the hospital. It's that illness that kills them. It can start that downward spiral. And essentially, it's the planet we're leaving for people after ourselves.
Yeah, real quick, the movie that I was talking about is called The Day After Tomorrow, and the scientific paper was talking about how that could be the potential outlook for humanity. And you guys if you haven't seen that movie, watch it.
Yeah. Yep, good
Watch it.
recommendation. So with that, everybody, we want to say thank you. And for everyone in the chat room, thanks. It's great seeing all the things you guys are writing. And love the fact that you're all intermingling and meeting each other. We
Yeah.
see a lot of regulars every week and a lot of new ones. And again, anybody who's watching this on the replay, if you do want to see this live and chat with us in the chat room every Thursday evening, 9 p.m. Eastern time, North America Eastern time, and you'll see our episode. And for anybody watching on the replay, again, we are on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, and the UnX Network, our proud network supporter. And that's all I got for today. So on behalf of myself, Louis Borges, and my best buddy, my co-host, Marquise Williams, I want to thank you all for joining us today and putting some effort into improving your health and the health of everybody around yourself. We will see you next week for a brand new episode. Until then, take care of each other, and we'll see you next week.